He was very young. Get over it. We need his trust fund for your sister's wedding in Greece. I stared at my phone screen, my mother's text message burning into my retinas. My hands trembled as I sat in the funeral home's parking lot, still wearing the black dress I'd put on that morning. My 3-year-old son's funeral had ended an hour ago. The small casket, the few flowers I could afford, the empty chairs where my family should have been sitting, all of it replayed in my mind like a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. My name is Brianne, and I'm 31 years old. I work as a lawyer at a mid-sized firm in Portland, Oregon, handling corporate litigation. For the past 3 years, I'd been a single mother to my beautiful boy, Ethan. His father left before he was born, and I'd raised my son alone while building my career from the ground up. Every late night studying case files, every early morning before daycare drop-off, every sacrifice I made. It was all for him. 3 weeks ago, Ethan got sick. What started as a fever turned into something worse. The doctors did everything they could, but his little body just couldn't fight it anymore. I held his hand as he took his last breath, whispering that Mommy loved him, that everything would be okay. But nothing was okay. Nothing would ever be okay again. My family knew about the funeral. I'd sent them the details 2 weeks ago. My parents lived just 40 minutes away in Vancouver, and my younger sister Jessica was staying with them while planning her wedding. I'd asked, no, begged them to come, to be there for me, to help me say goodbye to my son, their grandson, their nephew. Instead, they chose a venue tasting for Jessica's destination wedding. The text from my mother came with a photo attached. I opened it, and there they were, my parents and Jessica, all smiling broadly, holding champagne glasses at some upscale restaurant. The caption read, "Found the perfect place for the rehearsal dinner. Jessica is going to have the wedding of her dreams." My sister had sent her own message. "Sorry I couldn't make it today, but you understand, right? This wedding only happens once. Besides, Ethan was just a baby. It's not like he would have remembered anything anyway." I typed back with shaking fingers, "Whatever makes you happy." Then I blocked all their numbers. People always ask me why I helped my family so much. The truth is complicated. Growing up, I was the responsible one. The one who got good grades, who went to college on scholarships, who became a lawyer while working 2 jobs. Jessica was the baby, the princess, the one who could do no wrong. And I accepted it, because that's what families do, right? You help each other. After law school, when I started making decent money, my parents began asking for help. Small things at first. A few $100s for car repairs, money for property taxes. Then it became bigger. When my father's business started struggling, I paid his commercial lease for 6 months. When my mother wanted to renovate their kitchen, I covered most of the cost. When Jessica needed money for her elaborate engagement party, I wrote the check without hesitation. I never kept track of the exact amount, but over the years, I'd given my family close to $200,000, maybe more. It became normal, expected. They'd call, I'd transfer money. Sometimes they said thank you. Usually they didn't. But none of that mattered anymore. What mattered was that my son was gone, and they couldn't be bothered to show up because they were too busy planning Jessica's dream wedding to some guy named Brandon she'd been dating for 8 months. I'd set up a trust fund for Ethan when he was born. I wanted him to have opportunities I never had, to go to any college he wanted, to never worry about money the way I did growing up. I'd put away $50,000 initially and added to it whenever I could. With careful investments and some luck, it had grown to $850,000. That money was supposed to be his future, his education, his life. Now it was just sitting there, and apparently, my family had decided it should fund Jessica's Mediterranean fantasy wedding. I sat in my car as the sun began to set, watching the funeral home staff turn off the lights and lock the doors. A handful of my colleagues from work had attended the service. My boss had sent flowers. Ethan's daycare teacher had cried more than my own mother probably would have. My phone buzzed with a notification. I'd forgotten to block my father. His message was brief. "Your mother said you're being dramatic. We'll talk about this when you calm down. Jessica needs that money for her wedding. Ethan can't use it now anyway. Don't be selfish." Selfish. They were calling me selfish for not wanting to hand over my dead son's inheritance to pay for my sister's extravagant destination wedding. Something inside me cracked. Or maybe it had already been broken, and I was just now noticing. I looked down at my phone, at the message from my father, at the blocked numbers from my mother and sister. I thought about all the money I'd given them over the years, all the times I'd said yes when I should have said no. I started my car and drove home to my empty apartment. Ethan's toys were still scattered across the living room floor. I had a decision to make. The next morning, I called in sick to work and made an appointment with my financial advisor. Gerald was a kind man in his 50s who'd helped me set up Ethan's trust fund 3 years ago. He'd sent a beautiful sympathy card after learning about my son's passing. "Brianne, I'm so sorry for your loss," he said as I sat down in his office. His voice was gentle, the kind of tone people use around broken things they're afraid might shatter completely. "Thank you," I managed. I'd stopped crying 2 days ago. Now I just felt hollow, like someone had scooped out my insides and left only a shell. "I need to talk about Ethan's trust fund." Gerald nodded slowly. "Of course. What would you like to know?" "Everything. Who has access to it? What happens to it now? Can anyone else claim it?" He pulled up the documents on his computer. "The trust is solely in your name as the trustee and beneficiary designate. Since Ethan has passed, you have complete control over the assets. No one else can access or claim these funds without your explicit authorization." Relief flooded through me. So if someone were to try to convince me to use it for something else, they'd have no legal standing? None whatsoever. This is your money now, Brianne. You can do whatever you wish with it. I leaned back in my chair. What if I wanted to make sure certain people could never benefit from it? Is there a way to protect it? Gerald's expression shifted slightly. He'd been my advisor long enough to recognize when something was wrong. "Are you concerned about someone trying to access these funds?" "My family wants me to use my son's money to pay for my sister's wedding," I said flatly. "They didn't come to his funeral because they were planning this wedding. They think I'm being selfish for not immediately handing over $850,000 for a destination wedding in Greece." Gerald's face went pale. "I'm sorry, that's unconscionable. I need to protect this money," I continued. "Not just from them, but I need to make sure it's used for something meaningful, something that honors Ethan's memory. Can you help me with that?" He was quiet for a moment, then nodded. "Yes. We can restructure the assets, create barriers to access, and establish clear stipulations for how the funds can be used. Give me a few days to draw up some options for you." I left his office feeling lighter than I had in weeks. Not happy. I couldn't imagine ever feeling happy again. But purposeful. For the first time since Ethan died, I had something to focus on besides the crushing weight of grief. My phone had 17 missed calls by the time I got home, all from numbers I didn't recognize. My father must have been calling from different phones, trying to get around the block. There were also 3 voicemails. I listened to the first one. My mother's voice, sugary sweet. "Honey, I know you're upset, but we need to talk about this reasonably. Jessica's wedding is in 4 months, and Brandon's family is counting on us to contribute. You know his parents aren't wealthy like we are. We told them we'd cover the venue and the accommodations for all the guests. That trust fund would be perfect for this. Ethan would have wanted his aunt to be happy." The second voicemail was from my sister. Her tone was less sweet. "Brianne, Stop being ridiculous. Mom and Dad said you blocked them. This is crazy. Nobody expects you to get over losing Ethan right away, but life goes on. My wedding is important too. Call me back. The third was from my father. I've tried to be patient, but this is getting out of hand. That money is just sitting there doing nothing. Your sister needs it for her future. You're being incredibly selfish, and your mother is sick with worry about how you're handling this. Call us back immediately so we can discuss this like adults. I deleted all 3 messages and added the new numbers to my block list. That evening, I finally went into Ethan's room. I'd been avoiding it since he passed, unable to face the tiny bed with the dinosaur sheets, the bookshelf full of picture books we'd read together every night, the toy chest overflowing with trucks and blocks and stuffed animals. I sat on the floor and pulled out his favorite stuffed elephant, the one he'd named Peanut. He'd slept with it every single night. I held it against my chest and finally let myself remember. Ethan had been everything to me. His laugh, the way he'd run to me when I picked him up from daycare, how he'd say "I love you, Mommy" in his sweet little voice, the way he'd hold my hand when we crossed the street, his obsession with construction vehicles, and his insistence on wearing his rain boots even on sunny days. My family had barely acknowledged him when he was alive. My parents visited maybe 3 times a year, usually when they needed something. Jessica had met him twice. They'd sent cards on his birthday with $50 inside and considered their duty done. But now that he was gone, now that there was money involved, suddenly they cared. Suddenly they wanted to be part of his legacy, by erasing it completely and using his future to fund a party. I looked at Peanut the elephant and made a promise. They're not getting a penny. I'm going to make sure your memory means something. My phone buzzed with another call from an unknown number. I didn't answer. 2 weeks passed, and my family's attempts to reach me became increasingly desperate. They started showing up at my apartment. The first time, I simply didn't answer the door. I watched through the peephole as my mother knocked repeatedly, calling my name, insisting we needed to talk. "Brienne, I know you're in there. Your car is in the parking lot. Open this door right now. You can't keep avoiding us forever." I stood silently on the other side, barely breathing, until she finally gave up and left. The second visit was worse. Jessica came with my parents, and she was furious. I could hear her voice through the door. "This is insane. You're ruining my wedding because you want to punish us for not coming to a funeral. Ethan is dead, Brienne. Dead. Crying about it won't bring him back. But I'm alive, and I'm getting married, and I deserve to have the wedding I've always dreamed of." My father's voice joined in. "We raised you, Brienne. We fed you, clothed you, put a roof over your head. You owe us. That money should go to family, to someone who's alive and has a future. Stop being so goddamn selfish and think about someone other than yourself for once." I recorded that entire encounter on my phone. I wasn't sure why at the time, but something told me I might need it later. At work, I threw myself into my cases with an intensity that worried my colleagues. I stayed late every night, took on extra work, volunteered for the cases no one else wanted. It was easier than going home to an empty apartment, easier than facing the silence where Ethan's laughter used to be. My boss, Patricia, called me into her office after I'd been back at work for 3 weeks. "Brienne, I need to talk to you about something," she said, gesturing for me to sit. "I'm worried about you." "I'm fine," I said automatically. "My work hasn't suffered. I've actually closed 2 cases ahead of schedule this month." "That's exactly what concerns me," Patricia said gently. "You're working yourself into the ground. You're here before everyone else. You leave after everyone's gone, and you're taking on more than any human being should handle. I understand you're grieving, but this isn't healthy." I looked down at my hands. Working is the only thing that makes sense right now. Everything else is just noise. Patricia was quiet for a moment. "I also heard from HR that your family has been calling here, asking to speak with you. We've been redirecting them as you requested, but they're becoming quite insistent. Is everything all right? Define all right, I said bitterly. My family skipped my son's funeral to taste wedding cakes, and now they want me to give them his trust fund to pay for my sister's destination wedding. They've been harassing me for weeks. So no, everything is not all right, but I'm handling it. Patricia's expression shifted from concern to anger. They did what? I hadn't meant to tell her. The words just spilled out. And once they started, I couldn't stop them. I told her everything. About the text message during the funeral. About my family's years of financial dependency. About their complete disregard for my grief. About their entitlement to money that was meant to be my son's future. When I finished, Patricia was silent for a long moment. Then she said, I had no idea you'd been dealing with this. I'm so sorry, Brianne. No one should have to face this kind of betrayal from their own family. I've cut them off completely, I said. I'm not giving them anything. But they won't stop calling, won't stop showing up. I'm starting to worry about what they might do next. Patricia leaned forward. Document everything. Every call, every visit, every message. If they escalate, we need to be prepared to take legal action if necessary. And take some time off. Please, you need to process your grief, not bury it under work. I shook my head. I can't. If I stop moving, if I let myself feel all of it, I'm afraid I'll never get back up. That night, I met with Gerald again. He had restructured Ethan's trust fund into a charitable foundation in my son's name. The money would fund scholarships for children who'd lost a parent, help families with medical bills they couldn't afford, and support pediatric research. Everything my family could never be. This is ironclad, Gerald assured me. The funds are protected, the foundation is registered, and you're listed as the sole director. No one can access this money except through the proper foundation channels, which you control completely. I signed the papers with a sense of finality. What happens if someone tries to claim they have rights to this money? They'd have to prove legal standing, which they don't have. The trust was in your name, and you've legally restructured it into a charitable foundation. Even if they sued, which they can't, they'd lose. This money is protected. I drove home feeling something close to peace. My phone rang. Another unknown number. I didn't answer. When the voicemail notification popped up, I listened to it. My mother's voice, no longer sweet. Brianne, this has gone on long enough. Your father's business is failing. We've had to put our house on the market. Jessica had to postpone her wedding because we can't afford to pay for it anymore. This is your fault. You've destroyed this family because you're too bitter about a child who's already gone. Call us back, or I swear to God, we'll make you regret this. I saved the voicemail, added it to the growing collection of evidence I'd been keeping. Then I realized something that should have been obvious from the start. My family hadn't just been asking for money. They'd been depending on it, expecting it, building their entire lifestyle around the assumption that I would always say yes, always help, always be their personal bank account. And now that I'd stopped, their whole world was crumbling. Part of me felt guilty. The other part felt nothing at all. A month after Ethan's funeral, I came home from work to find my apartment had been broken into. The door wasn't damaged. Someone had used a key. My spare key, the one I'd given my parents years ago for emergencies. Nothing was stolen. Instead, there was a note on my kitchen counter in my mother's handwriting. We came to talk sense into you since you won't answer our calls. The trust fund paperwork should be in your home office. We looked but couldn't find it. Call us immediately. This is your last chance to do the right thing before we take legal action. They'd gone through my things, searched my home office, looked through my bedroom drawers, my closet, my files. The violation felt like ice water in my veins. I called a locksmith immediately and had all my locks changed. Then I drove to the police station and filed a report for breaking and entering. The officer taking my statement looked uncomfortable when I explained the situation. "Ma'am, if they had a key you gave them, it's technically not breaking and entering," he said carefully. "It's more of a civil matter. They used that key without permission to enter my home and search through my private documents," I said, keeping my voice level even though fury burned in my chest. "That's trespassing at minimum." The officer sighed. "I'll file the report, but I'm being honest with you. This probably won't go anywhere. Family disputes like this rarely do. Have you considered getting a restraining order?" "Against my own parents?" "If they're harassing you and entering your home without permission, yes. Document everything and come back if it continues. We'll have a record then." I left the station feeling defeated. When I got home, I noticed something else. The photo albums I kept in my closet had been disturbed. The ones full of pictures of Ethan. They'd gone through those too, probably looking for bank statements or legal documents hidden between the pages. The thought of my mother's hands on those photos, of Jessica flipping through images of the nephew she couldn't be bothered to know while searching for money, made me physically sick. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about what they'd touched, what they'd seen, how they'd invaded the one space that was supposed to be safe. Around 3 a.m, my phone rang. I'd forgotten to block this particular number. My father's office line. I answered without thinking. "Hello?" "Finally," my father's voice came through, sharp and angry. "Do you have any idea what you've put us through? Your mother hasn't slept in weeks. Jessica's fiancé is threatening to call off the wedding. We've had to borrow money from your uncle just to keep the lights on." "You broke into my apartment," I said, my voice hollow. "You went through my things." "We used a key you gave us," he countered. "We're your parents. We have a right to know what you're doing with that money. Jessica deserves that wedding, Brianne. She's been planning it for months. You can't just destroy her dreams because you're angry." "My son is dead," I said quietly. "Ethan is dead, and you didn't come to his funeral. You chose wedding planning over saying goodbye to your grandson." "Oh, for God's sake, he was 3 years old," my father exploded. "He barely even knew us. You kept him away from us anyway, always making excuses about why we couldn't visit. You're the one who created distance, and now you're punishing Jessica for it." The accusation hit me like a physical blow. "I kept him away? You visited 3 times in 3 years. 3 times. And each time, you spent the whole visit talking about Jessica or asking for money." "Because you had money to give," my father shouted. "You were making 6 figures while your family struggled. We needed help, and you had the means to provide it. That's what family does." "That's what I thought too," I said. "That's why I gave you nearly $200,000 over the years. That's why I paid for Jessica's engagement party, for Mom's kitchen renovation, for your business rent. I thought that's what family did. Help each other. But when I needed you to just show up and stand beside me while I buried my child, you couldn't even do that." There was silence on the other end. Then, "You're being dramatic. Jessica's wedding is important. It's a once-in-a-lifetime event. Funerals happen all the time. We can mourn Ethan anytime, but Jessica's wedding date was already set." Something snapped inside me. The last fragile thread connecting me to these people finally broke. "You're right," I said calmly. "Jessica's wedding is once in a lifetime, and she'll have to figure out how to pay for it herself, just like I figured out how to bury my son alone. Brianne, I've established a charitable foundation in Ethan's name," I continued. "Every penny of his trust fund is now legally protected and dedicated to helping other children. You can't touch it. No one can touch it except me, and I'll make sure it's used for something that actually matters." "You can't do that!" My father's voice rose to a shout. "That's our money. We were counting on it. Jessica needs it." "It was never your money. It was Ethan's, and now it'll help kids who actually need it, not fund a party for someone who couldn't be bothered to meet her nephew more than twice." "We'll sue you," he threatened. "We'll take you to court. You can't steal from your own family." "Try it," I said. "I'm a lawyer, Dad. I know exactly what I'm doing. You have no legal claim to that money. Never did. And if you come near me or my apartment again, I'll file for a restraining order. I've already filed a police report for your little breaking and entering stunt." "You ungrateful—" I hung up and blocked the number. My hands were shaking, but not from fear, from rage, from the sheer audacity of people who'd shown me so clearly that I meant nothing to them beyond what I could provide. The next morning, I called a real estate agent. I needed to move. This apartment had too many memories of Ethan, and now it was tainted by my family's intrusion. I needed a fresh start somewhere they couldn't find me. By the end of the week, I'd found a new place across town, given notice on my current apartment, and started packing. As I boxed up Ethan's things, his clothes, his toys, his books, I made a decision. I was going to take the money I'd been saving for a down payment on a house and use it for something else. I was going to make my family understand exactly what they'd lost. The plan came to me while I was packing Ethan's room. I'd been documenting everything my family had done. The text messages, the voicemails, the break-in, all of it. But documentation wasn't enough. I needed them to face consequences, real consequences, for their actions. I started by looking into my father's business. He owned a small consulting firm that had been struggling for years, kept afloat only by the money I'd been sending. I dug through public records and found something interesting. He'd been inflating his expenses and misrepresenting his income on loan applications. Not outright fraud, but definitely questionable practices that any bank would want to know about. Then there was my mother. She'd been volunteering at a local charity, one of those positions wealthy women took to feel important. She was on their board, helped organize their annual gala. I made a generous donation to that charity in Ethan's name, enough to get the director's attention. During our meeting, I casually mentioned that I'd love to help more, but had some concerns about board members who might not have the organization's best interests at heart. I didn't name names, but I planted seeds of doubt. For Jessica, I did something simpler but more devastating. I knew she'd been telling Brandon's family that we were wealthy, that our family would cover most of the wedding costs. She'd created an entire fiction about our family's financial status to impress her future in-laws. So I reached out to Brandon's mother, introduced myself as Jessica's sister, and had a very honest conversation about our family's actual situation. "I think there's been some miscommunication," I told her over coffee. "I know Jessica has been planning this elaborate destination wedding, but our family isn't in a position to contribute financially. My father's business is failing, my parents have had to sell their house, and I've recently experienced a personal tragedy that's made me reassess my financial priorities." Brandon's mother, Claire, looked confused. "But Jessica said your family runs a successful business, and that you're a high-powered lawyer who's been very generous with the family." "I am a lawyer," I confirmed, "and I have been generous in the past, but that's changed. I wanted you to know before any plans were finalized that whatever Jessica has promised, our family cannot deliver on." The conversation went on for another hour. Claire was a kind woman, and she seemed genuinely concerned about the situation. By the end, she understood that the wedding Jessica had been planning was a fantasy built on money that didn't exist. 3 days later, Jessica called me from yet another new number. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity got the better of me. "What did you do?" she screamed the moment I picked up. "What did you tell Brandon's family?" "The truth," I said simply. "That we're not wealthy and that you've been lying to them about our family's financial situation." "You ruined everything." Jessica was sobbing now. "Brandon's parents think I'm a liar. They're questioning whether the wedding should even happen. Brandon is furious with me. You destroyed my relationship because you're bitter about your dead kid." The words hit me like a slap, but I'd been expecting something like this. "No, Jessica. You destroyed your own relationship by building it on lies. I just stopped enabling those lies." Mom and Dad are right about you, she spat. You're selfish and cruel. Ethan died because you were a terrible mother. Probably. You were always working, never paying attention to him. This is all your fault. And now you want everyone else to suffer because you're miserable. My vision went red. Say that again, I said, my voice dangerously quiet. Say one more word about my son. Jessica must have heard something in my tone because she went quiet. Then she whispered, I didn't mean... Yes, you did, I cut her off. You meant every word. That's who you really are. Someone who would use a child's death as a weapon because she can't afford her dream wedding. And you know what? You deserve everything that's coming to you. I hung up and immediately called my lawyer. Not my boss, Patricia, but a family law attorney I knew from law school. I explained the situation and asked about my options. You want to sue your own family? She asked carefully. I want them held accountable, I corrected. They broke into my home. They've been harassing me for months, and my sister just told me my son died because I was a negligent mother. I want restraining orders. I want charges filed for the break-in, and I want them to understand that actions have consequences. My lawyer was quiet for a moment. Brianne, I'll help you with the restraining orders, but you need to think about what you're doing here. Family litigation gets ugly fast, and it sounds like things are already pretty ugly. They made it ugly when they skipped my son's funeral, I said. I'm just finishing what they started. The restraining orders were filed within the week. My parents, Jessica, and even my uncle, who'd apparently been helping them, received notices that they were to stay at least 500 feet away from me at all times. No contact, no communication, nothing. My father called Patricia's office the day after he was served, threatening legal action against the firm for my harassment of the family. Patricia shut that down immediately, making it clear that any further contact would result in additional legal action from both me and the firm. But the real blow came 2 weeks later. My father's bank received an anonymous tip about his questionable business practices. An audit was launched. My mother was quietly asked to step down from the charity board after several other board members expressed concerns about her judgment and integrity. And Jessica's wedding was officially called off when Brandon's family refused to help pay for it, and my parents couldn't come up with the money they'd promised. I learned all of this through the grapevine, friends of friends, professional networks, the small ways information travels in any community. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel victorious. I felt empty, like I'd hollowed myself out to make room for all this revenge. And now that it was done, there was nothing left. Then my mother did something that changed everything. She went to the press. Not the big newspapers, but local news outlets, social media, anywhere that would listen. She told them a story about a cruel, heartless daughter who'd stolen her dead son's inheritance from his grieving grandparents. She painted herself and my father as devastated grandparents denied the chance to honor their grandson's memory, and painted me as a monster who was using the money for myself while letting my family suffer. The story went viral in our local community. Suddenly, I was the villain in a narrative I hadn't even known existed. My phone exploded with messages from people I hadn't heard from in years, all of them demanding to know if the story was true. Colleagues at work gave me strange looks. Someone left a nasty note on my car calling me heartless. I sat in my new apartment, surrounded by boxes I hadn't finished unpacking, and realized my mother had just made a fatal mistake. I spent one evening gathering every piece of documentation I had. Every text message, every voicemail, every email. Screenshots of Jessica's social media posts from Ethan's funeral day, showing her at the restaurant tasting venue. Bank statements showing every dollar I'd sent my family over the years. The police report from the break-in. The recording of Jessica telling me Ethan died because I was a negligent mother. Then I called a friend who worked in public relations. Her name was Olivia, and we'd gone to law school together before she decided corporate law wasn't for her. She now handled crisis management for high-profile clients. I need your help, I told her, laying out everything that had happened. Olivia listened without interrupting. When I finished, she was quiet for a long moment. Brianne, this is bad. Your mother's story is gaining traction because it's emotional. Dead child, grieving grandparents, cold-hearted daughter. It's a narrative people want to believe because it's simple. But it's not true. Truth doesn't matter if the lie is more compelling, Olivia said bluntly. But here's the thing. You have documentation. You have proof. And more importantly, you have a counter-narrative that's even more emotional if we tell it right. What do you mean? We need to get ahead of this. Not with a defensive statement, but with the full truth. And we need to do it publicly, the same way your mother did. Are you prepared for that? Because once you go public, there's no taking it back. I thought about Ethan, about his funeral where I'd stood alone, about the trust fund I'd protected in his name, about the foundation that would help other children because my family couldn't be bothered to care about my own. I'm ready, I said. Olivia and I spent the next 3 days crafting a statement. Not a defensive one, not an angry one, but a factual recounting of everything that had happened. We included screenshots, voicemails, everything. Then we reached out to the same local news outlets my mother had contacted and offered them the full story, the real story. The reporter who'd originally run my mother's story called me personally. Her name was Jennifer, and she sounded genuinely apologetic. I should have gotten both sides before running that piece, she admitted. Your mother was very convincing, and the story was compelling, but I should have done my due diligence. You can make it right now, I said. Run the full story. Let people see everything. The new article went live on a Tuesday morning. It was titled, The Other Side. How a grieving mother's family skipped her son's funeral for a wedding, then demanded his trust fund. Jennifer had done her job well. The article included everything, the timeline of events, the text message my mother sent during the funeral, the break-in, the harassment, Jessica's cruel words about Ethan, and the establishment of the charitable foundation in his name. She'd even verified the police report and spoken with my lawyer about the restraining orders. The response was immediate and overwhelming. The same people who'd called me heartless were now apologizing. My mother's social media posts were flooded with angry comments. Someone created a fundraiser for Ethan's foundation that raised $30,000 in the first week. But it was what happened to my family that really showed me how thoroughly their world had crumbled. My father's business audit uncovered enough irregularities that he lost his remaining clients. The bank called in his loans, and he was forced to declare bankruptcy. The house they'd already put on the market sold, but for far less than they'd hoped, barely covering what they owed. My mother, who'd built her entire social identity on being a pillar of the community, found herself ostracized. The charity board not only asked her to step down, but publicly distanced themselves from her. Her friends stopped calling. Her book club suddenly had no room for her. Jessica's relationship with Brandon didn't survive. His family made it clear they wanted nothing to do with someone who'd lied so extensively, and Brandon, who'd apparently been having his own doubts, ended the engagement. Jessica moved back in with our parents, into their small rental apartment, the only place they could afford after selling the house. I learned all of this not from them, the restraining orders held, but from Olivia, who monitored the situation to make sure they didn't violate the court orders or try to restart their public campaign against me. They're done, Olivia told me over coffee one afternoon. Your father can't get work because no one trusts him. Your mother is basically a social pariah. And Jessica is working at a department store because she can't find anything in her field. Apparently, future employers are finding all her social media posts about you and deciding she's too much of a liability. I should have felt satisfied. Instead, I felt nothing. The hollow emptiness I'd been carrying since Ethan died hadn't been filled by revenge. If anything, it felt deeper. Are you okay? Olivia asked gently. I don't know, I admitted. I wanted them to understand what they'd done. I wanted them to face consequences. And they are. But it doesn't change anything. Ethan is still gone. I'm still alone. And I'm still the person who destroyed her own family. You didn't destroy anything, Olivia said firmly. They destroyed themselves. You just stopped enabling them. A week later, I received a letter. It was from my uncle, the one who'd helped my parents and had been included in the restraining order. He wasn't trying to contact me directly. The letter went through my lawyer. It was short. Brianne, I know I can't speak to you directly, but I needed you to know that I understand now what really happened. Your parents came to me with their version of events, and I believed them because they're family. I helped them because I thought you were being cruel. I was wrong. I've seen the evidence, read the articles, and I know the truth now. I'm sorry I didn't see it sooner. I'm sorry I didn't stand up for you. And I'm sorry about Ethan. He deserved better grandparents, and you deserved better parents. I hope someday you can forgive us all, but I understand if you can't. I read the letter 3 times, then filed it away with all the other documentation. Forgiveness felt like something that belonged to a different person, someone who hadn't learned that family could be this cruel. But there was one more thing I needed to do, one final piece to put in place before I could truly move forward. I called Gerald, my financial advisor, and asked him to arrange a press conference to announce the official launch of Ethan's foundation. I wanted to do something public, something that would honor my son's memory properly, the way my family never had. This will bring more attention, Gerald warned. Are you sure you're ready for that? I am, I said. My family tried to use Ethan's death for their own gain. I want the world to see what his life, and his memory, is really being used for. The press conference was scheduled for the following month. The press conference was held at the downtown Hilton on a crisp October morning, exactly 6 months after Ethan's death. I stood backstage, smoothing down my black dress, watching through the curtain as reporters and community members filled the seats. Olivia had done an excellent job promoting the event. Local news stations, newspapers, even a few regional outlets had sent representatives. You ready for this? Olivia asked, appearing beside me with a bottle of water. I took a sip and nodded. I need to do this. For Ethan. The foundation was real now, fully established and funded. The $850,000 from Ethan's trust had been joined by the $30,000 from the online fundraiser and additional donations that had come in after Jennifer's article. We'd already awarded our first 3 scholarships to children who'd lost parents, and we'd paid medical bills for 2 families facing bankruptcy from pediatric cancer treatments. This press conference was about making it official, showing the community what their donations were funding, and most importantly, ensuring that Ethan's name would be remembered for something beautiful, instead of being a footnote in my family's greed. Patricia had come to support me, sitting in the front row. So had Jennifer, the reporter who'd helped set the record straight. And Olivia, of course, who'd orchestrated this entire event. The foundation's board chair, a retired pediatrician named Dr. Helen, walked onto the stage to introduce me. Through the curtain, I saw her approach the podium, adjusting the microphone. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us for this very special announcement. 6 months ago, this community heard a story about greed and betrayal. Today, I want to tell you a story about love and legacy. Please welcome Brianne, founder and director of the Ethan Hope Foundation. The applause was warm as I walked onto the stage. The lights were bright, momentarily blinding me, but I found my footing and stood at the podium. I'd prepared remarks, printed them out and practiced them a dozen times. But when I opened my mouth, different words came out. My son Ethan was 3 years old when he died, I began, my voice steady despite the emotion tightening my chest. He loved dinosaurs, construction trucks, and a stuffed elephant named Peanut. He had the most beautiful laugh, and he could brighten any room just by walking into it. When he died, my world ended. I paused, looking out at the faces in the audience. Some were crying already. Ethan had a trust fund that was supposed to fund his education, his future, his dreams. When he passed, my family, my parents and my sister, demanded that money to pay for a wedding. They didn't come to his funeral. They chose cake tasting and venue tours over saying goodbye to their grandson. And when I refused to hand over his trust fund, they launched a campaign to destroy my reputation and force me to give them what they felt entitled to. The room was absolutely silent now. I saw reporters typing furiously on their laptops. But this isn't a story about them, I continued. This is a story about Ethan and about making sure his short life mattered. The Ethan Hope Foundation exists to help families facing the kinds of challenges we faced: medical bills, lost income, the overwhelming cost of grief. We provide scholarships to children who've lost parents. We pay medical bills for families drowning in debt. We fund pediatric research. We turn tragedy into hope. I pulled out a folder and held it up. In the past 6 months, we've helped 15 families. We've awarded scholarships to 3 remarkable children. We've paid over $200,000 in medical bills. And we're just getting started. The applause started then, growing louder until it filled the room. I let it wash over me. This moment of acknowledgement, of community support, of validation that Ethan's life and death meant something. When the applause died down, I continued. I want to thank everyone who's donated, who's shared our story, who's believed in this mission. Every dollar given to this foundation honors my son's memory in a way my family never could. Dr. Helen joined me on stage then, presenting a large check, a donation from a local hospital system for $100,000. More applause, more flashing cameras. After the formal presentation, reporters had questions. Most were about the foundation, its mission, its plans for expansion. But inevitably, someone asked about my family. Brianne, your mother has made statements on social media claiming you've reconciled and that she supports the foundation. Can you comment on that? I hadn't seen these posts. I'd blocked all my family on every platform. But I wasn't surprised my mother was trying to insert herself into this positive narrative. I have no contact with my parents or my sister, I said clearly. There has been no reconciliation. Court-ordered restraining orders remain in effect. My family's attempts to associate themselves with this foundation are false and unwelcome. This foundation exists despite them, not because of them. Another reporter raised her hand. Do you think you'll ever forgive them? I considered the question carefully. Forgiveness isn't something I'm thinking about right now. Right now, I'm focused on building something good from something terrible. I'm focused on making sure other families don't face the same isolation and financial devastation that we faced. Whether I forgive my family someday is between me and my therapist. That got a small laugh from the audience, breaking some of the tension. The press conference ended with more photos, more handshakes, more promises of support. As I walked off stage, Olivia caught my arm. Your phone, she said, holding it out to me. It's been going crazy. I looked at the screen. 47 missed calls from unknown numbers, dozens of text messages. My family, undoubtedly, trying to reach me after seeing the press conference, after realizing their attempt to claim credit had been publicly shot down. I turned the phone off completely. 2 weeks after the press conference, my lawyer called with news. My father was attempting to sue me for defamation and emotional distress based on my public statements about the family. His lawyer had filed papers claiming I'd damaged his reputation and business prospects by spreading lies about why they'd missed Ethan's funeral. I almost laughed when my lawyer explained it. He's actually doing this? He is. It's a frivolous suit. You have documentation for everything you've said publicly, and truth is an absolute defense against defamation. But it'll be annoying to deal with. Let him try, I said. I have recordings, text messages, emails, police reports, and dozens of witnesses. If he wants to put all of this in front of a judge, I'm happy to oblige. The lawsuit was filed on a Monday. By Wednesday, Jennifer had written another article about it, complete with legal experts explaining why the suit had no merit. By Friday, my father's lawyer had withdrawn from the case, apparently unwilling to be associated with such an obviously baseless claim. But my father wasn't done. If he couldn't sue me, he'd try another approach. He showed up at my office. Patricia called me immediately. "Brianne, your father is in the lobby. Security is with him, but he's demanding to see you. He says it's an emergency." "I have a restraining order against him," I said, already gathering my things. "Call the police." I went down to the lobby anyway, staying far enough back to maintain the 500-foot distance the restraining order required. My father looked terrible. Thinner than I remembered, his face haggard, his clothes slightly rumpled. For a moment, I felt a flicker of something that might have been pity. Then he saw me and started shouting. "Brianne! Finally! You need to drop this ridiculous restraining order. We need to talk about the foundation. I'm your father, for God's sake. You can't just cut me out of your life like this." Security was already moving toward him. I could see a police car pulling up outside. "We've been destroyed," he continued, his voice breaking. "Your mother can't show her face anywhere. Jessica can't find work. I've lost everything, and it's all because you decided to punish us for one mistake." "One mistake?" I called back, careful to maintain my distance. "You skipped your grandson's funeral for wedding planning. You broke into my home. You harassed me for months. You demanded money that was never yours. That's not one mistake. That's a pattern of behavior." "He was 3 years old," my father shouted. "He barely knew us. You're destroying your entire family over a child who wouldn't even remember us." The police officers were inside now, approaching my father from both sides. He saw them, and his expression changed from desperate to panicked. "This is insane," he yelled as they took his arms. "I'm her father. I have a right to talk to my daughter." "You have a restraining order, sir," one of the officers said calmly. "You need to come with us." As they led him out, my father looked back at me. "Your mother is sick, Brianne. Actually sick. She needs help, and we can't afford it because of what you've done. Do you want her death on your conscience too?" I stood frozen as they took him away. Patricia appeared beside me, placing a gentle hand on my shoulder. "Are you okay?" "Is that true?" I asked. "About my mother being sick?" Patricia's expression was sympathetic, but firm. "Even if it is, Brianne, it's not your responsibility. They made their choices. They're living with the consequences." I knew she was right. But that night I couldn't stop thinking about it. I called my uncle, not directly, but through my lawyer, asking if it was true. His response came the next day. "Your mother has high blood pressure and stress-related issues. Nothing life-threatening. Your father is exaggerating to manipulate you. Don't fall for it." So even now, even facing the complete collapse of their lives, my family was still trying to manipulate me, still trying to find a way to make me responsible for fixing their problems. The violation of the restraining order meant my father spent 3 days in jail. When he was released, there were additional legal consequences: fines, a more restrictive restraining order, and a warning that any future violations would result in more serious charges. My mother tried a different approach. She couldn't contact me directly, so she went back to social media. She posted long, emotional messages about a mother's pain, about being separated from her daughter, about health struggles and financial devastation. She painted herself as the victim of a vindictive child who'd turned success into cruelty. But this time, the response was different. People who'd followed the story, who'd seen the evidence, called her out immediately. The comments on her posts were brutal. "You skipped your grandson's funeral for a party. You get what you deserve. Stop trying to play the victim. Everyone knows what you did. Your daughter built something beautiful from her son's death. You tried to steal it. Own your actions." My mother's posts became increasingly desperate, increasingly unhinged. She claimed I'd forged evidence. She claimed the media had been paid off. She claimed there was a conspiracy against her. Watching someone self-destruct should have brought me satisfaction. Instead, it just made me tired. I deactivated my social media accounts entirely. I didn't need to see my family's downward spiral anymore. I knew what they'd become. I knew what they'd lost. And I knew that I'd done exactly what I'd set out to do. Made them understand that their actions had consequences. But understanding came too late. 8 months after Ethan's death, I received an invitation to speak at a national conference for child welfare advocates. The Ethan Hope Foundation had grown beyond anything I'd imagined. We'd helped over 50 families, established partnerships with 3 major hospitals, and our scholarship program was being used as a model by other organizations. I stood on the stage in Seattle, looking out at an audience of social workers, advocates, lawyers, and medical professionals, and I told them Ethan's story. Not just the tragedy, but the purpose we'd built from it. Grief doesn't end, I told them. It doesn't heal in some neat timeline, but it can transform. It can become something that helps others, something that prevents other families from suffering the same isolation and financial devastation we faced. After my speech, a woman approached me. She was in her 40s, tears streaming down her face. "My daughter died 2 years ago," she said. "I lost my job because I couldn't function. I lost my house because I couldn't pay the mortgage. My family told me I needed to get over it and move on. Your foundation, what you've built, it showed me that I'm not alone, that my daughter's life mattered. Thank you." We stood there in the convention center hallway, 2 mothers who'd lost their children, holding each other while we cried. This, I realized, was what mattered. Not revenge, not making my family suffer, but this: connection, understanding, helping others who were drowning in the same dark waters I'd barely survived. I flew back to Portland, feeling something I hadn't felt in months. Purpose that wasn't rooted in anger. My apartment was no longer filled with Ethan's things. I'd carefully packed them away, keeping his room intact in a storage unit until I was ready to face it. But I'd framed his favorite photo and put it on my mantle. Ethan at the park, laughing, his hair messy from playing, pure joy on his face. "I did it, baby," I whispered to the photo. "I made sure you mattered. I made sure your life meant something." My phone rang. It was my lawyer with an update I'd been expecting. "Your parents' rental lease isn't being renewed," she said. The landlord cited repeated disturbances and concerns about their behavior. Jessica was let go from her job at the department store for social media posts about customers. Your father filed for bankruptcy protection, but it was denied because of the irregularities in his business dealings. They're essentially homeless now. "Where will they go?" I asked, surprised that I cared enough to ask. "Your uncle offered them his guest house, but only if they agreed to family therapy and stopped their social media campaigns against you. They refused. Last I heard, they were looking at a long-term motel situation." I sat down on my couch, trying to process how completely their lives had fallen apart. They'd lost their home, their business, their social standing, their relationships, everything. And it had all started because they couldn't be bothered to show up for a child's funeral. "Brienne?" My lawyer's voice came through the phone. "Are you okay?" "I don't know," I admitted. "I wanted them to face consequences. And they have. But I don't feel what I thought I'd feel." "What did you think you'd feel?" "Satisfaction, maybe. Victory. But instead, I just feel empty. Like I've spent so much energy on revenge that there's nothing left for anything else." My lawyer was quiet for a moment. "Maybe it's time to stop focusing on them and start focusing on you. You've built an incredible foundation. You've helped dozens of families. You've turned your tragedy into something meaningful. That's your victory, not their downfall." After we hung up, I sat in the quiet of my apartment, thinking about what she'd said. The foundation was thriving. I was helping people. I'd protected Ethan's memory and ensured his trust fund did good in the world. My family's destruction was just a side effect of their own choices, not my goal. But there was something else I needed to do, something I'd been avoiding. I drove to the cemetery where Ethan was buried. I hadn't been back since the funeral. The thought of that small headstone with his name was too much to bear. But now, with the foundation established and my family's chapter closed, I needed to visit him. The cemetery was quiet in the late afternoon sun. I walked through the rows of headstones until I found his, a simple marker with his name, his dates, and the inscription I'd chosen. Forever loved, forever missed, forever 3. I sat down on the grass beside his grave and finally let myself cry. Not the silent tears I'd been shedding for months, but deep, wrenching sobs that came from a place of pure grief. I cried for the child I'd lost, for the life he'd never live, for the memories we'd never make. When the tears finally stopped, I told him everything. About the foundation, about helping other families, about how his short life was making a difference for children he'd never meet. Your grandparents and aunt will never understand what they lost, I said softly. They'll never know what an amazing person you were becoming. But other people know, baby. Other people see what you meant, what you still mean. And I promise you, I'll spend the rest of my life making sure your name is remembered for love, not for the ugliness that came after. The sun was setting as I drove home, painting the Portland sky in shades of orange and pink. Tomorrow, I had a meeting with a hospital about expanding the foundation's reach. Next week, I was interviewing candidates for scholarship recipients. Next month, I'd speak at another conference. My family had tried to profit from Ethan's death and had lost everything. I'd built something beautiful from his memory and found purpose in the darkest time of my life. My parents and Jessica never recovered from their downfall. They ended up in a cramped apartment in a rough part of town, living on whatever temporary work they could find. My father's reputation in his industry was destroyed beyond repair. No one would hire him after the audit revelations and the bankruptcy. My mother's health issues worsened under the stress, but pride kept her from seeking help from the few relatives who might have assisted. Jessica bounced between service jobs, her degree worthless in the face of her online history and the professional bridges she'd burned. The 3 of them lived together in bitter resentment, blaming me for their circumstances while refusing to acknowledge their own actions. They'd chosen greed over family, cruelty over compassion, and they would spend the rest of their lives living with those choices. My uncle kept me updated occasionally, not because I asked, but because he felt I should know. Each update confirmed what I already understood. They'd destroyed themselves long before I'd ever taken action. As for me, I learned that revenge is a hollow victory when grief is the price you paid for the battle. The foundation thrives. Ethan's name lives on in the children we help, and I've found purpose in transforming tragedy into hope. But late at night, when the apartment is quiet, I still reach for my phone to text my family about my day before remembering we're strangers now. I don't regret protecting my son's legacy or holding them accountable for their cruelty. But I've learned that justice and healing aren't the same thing. Some wounds close but never disappear. They simply become part of the landscape of who you are. Ethan deserved better than the family he was born into, so I built him a different legacy, one where love matters more than money, where his brief life continues to touch others, and where the people who failed him can never touch what I've created in his name. And maybe that's enough.